Pam Bondi, Donald Trump's sycophantic and authoritarian attorney general, visibly died inside when she was repeatedly pressed by none other than a fed-up Fox News reporter about the authoritarian nightmare that is the Trump administration's deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and you have to see it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a couple of clips to play here, but I want to start with this. So this is Attorney General Pam Bondi being pressed by a Fox News correspondent about the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case. That's the migrant who was deported to El Salvador unlawfully by the Trump administration. And even though both a district court and the Supreme Court of the United States effectively ordered Trump to get him back, they are refusing to do so. So we'll play this exchange and then unpack it together.
And then my off topic, big topic over the past few weeks, Kilmar Abrego Garcia in Maryland. He's in a prison now in El Salvador. He was sent there. You insist, the president, everybody in the administration insists that he is MS-13. It appears that there's not going to be any sort of trial. He's not going to come back. DHS said he would be arrested and redeported if he comes back. Why not show the American people the evidence that he's MS-13 so they can make an informed decision? And that goes the same with this Henry Josue Santos, who was picked up in Virginia, who is now presumably going to be deported as well. Why not show the public the evidence?
Well, he is an illegal alien who has been living illegally in our country from El Salvador. ICE testified, an immigration judge ruled he was a member of MS-13. An appellate judge ruled he was a member of MS-13. Hard stop. He should not be in our country. He was deported. They needed one additional step in paperwork, but now MS-13 is characterized as they should be, as an FTO, as a foreign terrorist organization. So he is not coming back to our country. President Bukele said he was not sending him back. That's the end of the story. If he wanted to send him back, we would give him a plane ride back. There was no situation ever where he was going to stay in this country. None. He would have come back, had one extra step of paperwork, and gone back again. But he's from El Salvador, he's in El Salvador, and that's where the president plans on keeping him.
But the evidence, we're not going to see the evidence?
We have the transcripts from the court hearings. I'll be glad to give you the court hearings from 2019, what we have, sure, with the rulings from the judges, gladly.
All right,
Again, not evidence whatsoever. And you can see she doesn't even want to answer the question. She's like, let's pivot. It's staggering, the shamelessness in this administration. And yet at the same time, how ill-equipped they are to actually deal with the facts. It's actually a pretty easy proposition. This is generating a lot of controversy. There was pushback from the Supreme Court of all places. Rather than risk a constitutional crisis, if you're not going to comply with the Supreme Court, could you at least make it easier for the public to digest by producing the substantial evidence that you have that this person that you unlawfully deported is in fact a hardened criminal and terrorist? And they're like, jingle car keys and run away. It's pretty pathetic. But again, the evidence that Kilmar is an MS-13 gang member is actually virtually non-existent.
CNN's Priscilla Alvarez just received this statement from Garcia's wife, who says in part, quote, "After surviving domestic violence in a previous relationship, I acted out of caution after a disagreement with Kilmar by seeking a civil protective order in case things escalated. Things did not escalate, and I decided not to follow through with the civil court process. That is not a justification for ICE's action," unquote. The Department of Homeland Security also gave CNN other documents that the Trump administration argues backs up their claims that Garcia is a member of the MS-13 gang, despite his continued denials that he is. Let's bring in CNN's Paula Reed. Paula, first, let's start with Judge Boasberg here deciding that there's a probable cause to hold Trump administration officials in contempt of court. That seems quite significant. What comes next?
So the administration has made it clear they intend to appeal this. They're going to fight. And that's not surprising because here Boasberg says that the administration's actions on this day specifically not turning around flights that were already in the air full of those migrants, that constituted a willful disregard of his order. Now, the Justice Department has argued that he was overstepping his authority by trying to interfere in the implementation of a foreign policy. Now, he has said he will begin contempt proceedings unless the migrants who are on those planes are afforded some sort of process, an opportunity to have their cases heard. But I want to remind folks, the Supreme Court has weighed in on this larger question of the use of the Alien Enemies Act, and it said that, yes, the administration can use this, but individuals deported under this act must have a court hearing. So here it appears Boasberger is just sort of endorsing what the Supreme Court already said. And given that the administration won at the Supreme Court on this issue so far, it is a little surprising, Jake, that the judge is pursuing contempt here. But as I said, the administration is going to fight this.
We also, just to talk more about Garcia, we have been asking now for weeks the administration for evidence to back up their assertion that he's a member of MS-13. They did make some claims on Twitter, and one of the things that they cited with us particularly was a court document saying that Garcia's outfit during his arrest was consistent with MS-13 symbolism. They sent us some court documents saying that his original immigration judge and the Board of Immigration Appeals found evidence to render him a danger to the public. Now, that doesn't contradict the fact that he was not supposed to be deported to El Salvador, a ruling that came down during the Trump administration that the Trump administration did not appeal at the time. But just to drill down a little bit on this idea of whether or not he was a member of MS-13, what do you make of this?
So it was great that you got these documents. I've been taking a look at them, and look, it makes reference to the fact that a police informant said Abrego Garcia was part of MS-13, but then he was denied bond, citing this accusation. They appealed, but in an immigration bond hearing, the detainee has the burden of proof to show that they are not a flight risk nor a danger to the community, and he failed to meet that burden. But that is not a conclusive finding that he was a member of MS-13. Now, his lawyer also points out that he's never been convicted of any crime, gang-related or otherwise. But look, Jake, the last word on this is the Supreme Court had a chance to weigh in and order him to be returned to the United States to make a ruling on the lack of proper processing here. They didn't do that. And until they decide to do that, which is very unlikely they will, he is not returning to the United States.
So, in other words, there's no substantial evidence at all that Abrego Garcia is an MS-13 member. Now, at the beginning of that clip, they were discussing a temporary restraining order filed by Abrego Garcia's wife. And again, as she said in a public statement, she said she did this years ago out of abundance of due caution after she experienced domestic abuse in previous relationships. And even as she points out, even if the bad faith interpretation was absolutely true, which is that, he's a domestic abuser, which she doesn't claim that he is, but even if that's true, it still does not make him, number one, an MS-13 member, and still doesn't mean that he is not eligible to due process. The fact of the matter is, alleged gang members, alleged domestic abusers, alleged drug dealers, alleged drug purchasers, the whole point of due process is it applies. And yes, it does indeed apply to migrants in this country, undocumented or otherwise. There was no due process whatsoever. That's why even this 6-3 conservative Supreme Court on a 9-0 decision, not a single one, indicated that there, yes, needs to be due process here and that the government needs to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. So again, getting all the way back to it, Pam Bondi just lying and saying, yeah, of course, the evidence is overwhelming that Abrego Garcia is an MS-13 member. Well, then produce it. Where is it? Show us the evidence. And she can't even look that Fox reporter in the eye after a certain amount of time. She has to turn, and he's like, okay, so enough about all that. Where's the evidence? Well, I'll provide you transcripts of the judge saying things. Okay, well, that's not the evidence. We're not talking about a judge ruling, an immigrant judge, by the way, in 2019, determining that Abrego Garcia could not be deported to El Salvador. That happened under Donald Trump. That's a ruling, not evidence, but the Trump administration disregarded that ruling whenever it was politically convenient for them, because otherwise they wouldn't have deported him to El Salvador and would have gotten him back after they violated that court order. So it's just all smoke and mirrors. Court matters when they think it matters, and they disregard it when they don't. But that's also not a principle that they, offer to Democrats either. It's just, it really is. It's the height of hypocrisy. It's the height of shamelessness. It's the height of authoritarian impulse to deny due process to people. The evidence isn't there that he's an MS-13 member. The government would produce it to shut people up otherwise, especially as Trump's approval rating craters. They would want to make the scandal go away. And instead, they're picking this fight. They're doubling down because they're trying to press the furthest reaches, the excesses of their authority, so that they can use it against their political opponents. We'll discuss that in another video. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.